I walked into The Plague knowing very little beyond the basic setup. A boys' water polo camp, a group of 12 and 13-year-olds, and a social dynamic that turns ugly. And I think that is the right way to experience this movie, because The Plague is not a film that explains itself. It observes, it lets things unfold, and it trusts you to recognize what you are seeing. This is not an entertaining sit. That is the first thing I want to be honest about. If you are looking for momentum, catharsis, or release, this is not that kind of movie. The Plague is an experience film. It puts you inside a social system and asks you to live there for its runtime. And that experience is uncomfortable in a very specific way. And what the film does extremely well is capture the logic of bullying without turning anyone into a cartoon villain. There is a ringleader. There always is. But the cruelty does not come from grand gestures or overt violence. It comes from permission. And from the group deciding who is acceptable and who is not. From small choices repeated enough times, they become the rules. The most unsettling idea in the film, and the one that stayed with me, is that empathy becomes the liability. Caring about the wrong person makes you visible. And that visibility in that environment is dangerous. The film understands that most kids are not cruel because they enjoy it. They are cruel because they are afraid of becoming the next target. That is where the movie really starts to cut. Watching the bullied slowly absorb the logic of the group, watching good intentions get twisted into enforcement, and watching someone convince themselves that they are helping when, in reality, they're just protecting their own position. That shift is not treated like a twist. It is treated like something inevitable. And that honesty is what makes the film hit as hard as it does. The performances from the kids are excellent. Not in a flashy way, not in a way that calls attention to itself. They understand restraint. They understand silence. They understand how much of this age is lived internally. Nothing feels forced. Nothing feels performative. These are kids who feel like kids, which is not easy to pull off. Visually, the film is doing a lot of the heavy lifting. The cinematography is worth talking about on its own. The water becomes a space of safety and threat at the same time. The locker rooms feel isolating even when they're crowded. Bodies are framed in ways that emphasize vulnerability rather than strength. The camera is not just documenting events, it is shaping how we experience them. And Joel Edgerton's involvement is also worth noting. As a producer, he is backing material that does not soften itself for comfort. As an actor, his role as a coach is fascinating because he's not presented as a villain or a savior. He's a man who does not know how to intervene, who does not know how to read the room, who is present but ineffective. And that felt painfully real. If I have a criticism, it is not about the craft, it's about the accessibility. The film demands patience, it demands emotional availability. It does not give you clear signposts or easy answers. And for some viewers, that will be a deal breaker. And that's fair. For me, it worked because it felt honest. It did not exaggerate childhood cruelty. It trusted how familiar it already is. So why does the movie like The Plague exist now? I think part of the answer is that we are finally willing to look at childhood without nostalgia, without pretending it was simpler or safer than it actually was. There is a growing space in modern cinema for stories that examine how early social systems form and how long they last. And audiences may walk into this expecting something closer to traditional horror film, or even something like The Lord of the Flies. And I understand why that comparison keeps coming up. A group of boys, a contained environment, power dynamics, cruelty, it is an easy reference point. But I do not think The Plague is about social collapse. It's about social maintenance. This is not a story about a group splitting apart. It is a group staying unified by sacrificing someone, by agreeing silently or otherwise that one person will carry the stigma so everyone else can feel safe. That distinction matters. In the landscape of the modern horror and grief cinema, The Plague sits in an interesting place. It does not rely on spectacle. It does not rely on escalation. The horror here is recognition. The horror is memory. It is the realization that these systems form early and repeat themselves with very little variation. And this film also understands something that feels especially relevant now. That harm does not require monsters. It requires incentives. It requires silence. It requires a group that benefits from looking the other way. And as a parent, that context hit me harder than I expected. And the adults in this film are peripheral, and that is not an accident. Childhood happens out of view. We hope our kids are making good decisions. We hope they're not being hurt. We hope they're not hurting others, but so much of that world exists beyond our reach. That does not make the adults villains. It makes them realistic. So who is this movie for? This is for viewers who appreciate observational storytelling, for people who are willing to sit with discomfort, for audiences who value craft, restraint, and honesty over entertainment value. It is for those who understand that some films are meant to be absorbed, not enjoyed. And who is it not for? This is not for viewers looking for momentum. It's not for viewers looking for payoff. It is not viewers who want their discomfort resolved by the end credits. The Plague does not offer solutions. It does not tell you what to think. It shows you how easily good intentions can become harm, how empathy can isolate you, and how early these patterns begin. And that may not be an easy sit, but it is a truthful one. And sometimes that's exactly what a film should be. Appreciate you going on this film journey with me, and as always, be real.
So what's with Eli?
Eli's got the plague.
It's not funny, bro.